All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Goodnight reading series of Jane Eyre. I'm very excited to be back again. I know I did take off last night. I just needed to take some time away and have something outside of this, something fun to do. But I'm glad to be back now and to see where our story leads for Jane. I'm pretty excited. So last time we ended up reading, Jane started getting more close to Mr. Rochester. She's starting to kind of, find him interesting to be around. She really enjoys his presence, and she's not so thrilled when he's not around. So that's kind of something that, she's starting to really develop feelings for him. And then one night, while they were all sleeping, all of a sudden she heard somebody laughing, and, she goes to investigate it. She believes it's this woman called Mrs. Poole, who is a person that lives within the house, and she's supposed to be some form of servant, and she's not entirely sure what the woman does, except that she sees her knitting or mending clothes and doing stitch work and all that. But anyway, so she hears the laugh again, and she goes out into the hallway, and she doesn't see anything, but then all of a sudden she smells smoke, and she's like, smoke means fire, something's bad is really happening. So she goes to investigate where it's located, and she finds out it's Mr. Rochester's bed curtains that are lit on fire. And obviously, she's acting quickly. She dumps water on him, and, he wakes up, and they extinguish the fire. And, he tells her to wait and that he'll come back. And so he leaves the room. And then when he comes back, he's like, I'm indebted to you. You're amazing. You could tell that he's also developing feelings for Jane. And it's just this very intense moment between the two of them. So that's kind of where we were. And Jane then tried to ask Mrs. Poole the following day, what she knew about the situation about, Mr. Rochester's bed being set on fire. And the woman obviously denied it and acted like nothing happened. And then Jane's so confused and perplexed by it, and she wants to talk to Mr. Rochester about it more. However, when she tries to seek him out, she realizes that he's away at a party at another hall, and he's with friends and of the sort. So she's really sad without him, and then she realizes, I'm just a governess. I'm nobody to him. I'm not a woman with power or money. You know, even my features are not handsome. I'm considered really nothing in the eyes of society. And she starts feeling really down on herself, and she has to remind herself that, you know, she could never be someone Mr. Rochester will be interested in because of her station and how she was raised. So she's kind of feeling bad about herself, and she's like, well, I really shouldn't care if he's here or not. Maybe I'm just being too forward in what he thinks of me. And that's kind of where we left off last time. So I'm excited to see if she continues this thought process of feeling bad about herself, and if we'll ever have more of a conversation of how things happened in Mr. Rochester's room that, alighted his furniture on fire. So we'll see what we'll find, and I'm pretty excited. So, anyway, we are going to be starting on chapter 17. So, get comfortable and let's hang out together and learn more about this wonderful story. Chapter 17. A week passed and no news arrived of Mr. Rochester. 10 days and still he did not come. Mrs. Fairfax said that she should not be surprised if he were to go straight from Lees to London, and thence to the Continent, and then not show his face again at Thornfield for a year to come. He had not frequently quitted it in a manner quite as abrupt and unexpected, and when I had heard this, I was beginning to feel a strange chill and a failing at the heart. I was actually permitting myself to experience a sickening sense of disappointment, but rallying my wits and recollecting my principles, I at once called my sensations to order, and it was wonderful how I got over the temporary blunder, how I cleared up the mistake of supposing Mr. Rochester's movements a matter in which that I had any cause to take a vital interest. Not that I humbled myself by a slavish notion of inferiority. On the contrary, I just said, "You have nothing to do with Master Rochester. further than to receive salary that he gives you for teaching his protege, and to be grateful for such a respectful and kind treatment as such. And if you do your duty, you have a right to expect at his hands, and be sure that only that tie that he seriously acknowledges between you and him. So don't make him the object of your fine feelings, your raptures, agonies, and so forth. He is not of your order. Keep to your caste, and be too self-respecting to lavish the love of the whole heart, soul, and strength, where such a gift is not wanted and would be despised. I went on with my daily business tranquillity. But ever and anon vague suggestions kept wandering across my brain of reasons why I should quit Thornfield, and I kept involuntarily framing advertisements and pondering conjectures about new situations. These thoughts I did not think to check. They might germinate and bear fruit if they could. Mr. Rochester had been absent upwards of a fortnight, and when the post brought Mrs. Fairfax a letter, "It is from the master," and she, as she looked at the direction, "Now I suppose that we shall know whether we are to expect his return or not." And while she broke the seal and perused the document, I went on taking my coffee, as we had been at breakfast. It was hot, and I attributed it to the circumstance of a fiery glow which suddenly rose to my face. Why my hand shook, and why I involuntarily split half the contents of my cup into the saucer, I did not choose to consider. "Well, I sometimes think we are too quiet, but we run a chance of being busy enough now, for a little while at least," said Mrs. Fairfax, still holding the note before her spectacles. Ere I permitted myself to request an explanation, I tied the string of Adele's pinafore, which happened to be loose, having helped her also into another bun, and refilled her mug with milk, and then I said nonchalantly, "Is Mr. Rochester not likely to return soon, I suppose?" "Indeed, he is 3 days. He says that will be the next Thursday, and not alone either. I don't know how many of the fine people at Lee's are coming with him. He sends directions for all the best bedrooms to be prepared, and the library and drawing rooms to be cleaned out. Oh, I'm to get more kitchen hands from the Georgian at Millcote, and from wherever else I can, and the ladies will be bringing their maids and the gentlemen their valets. So we shall have a full house. Oh, for it to be, that is to be said." And Mrs. Fairfax swallowed her tea and hastened away to commence operations. The 3 days were, as she had foretold, busy enough. I had thought all the rooms at Thornfield beautifully clean and well arranged, but it appears that I had been mistaken. 3 women were got to help, and such scrubbing, such brushing, and such washing of paint and beating of carpets, such taking down and putting up of pictures, such polishing of mirrors and lustres, such lighting of fires and bedrooms, such airing of sheets and feather beds on the hearths, I never beheld either before or since. Adele ran quite wild in the midst of it. The preparations for company and the prospect of their arrival seemed to throw her into ecstasies. She would have Sophie to look over her toilettes, as she called the frocks, to furbish any that were passé, and to air and arrange the new. For herself she did nothing but caper about in the front chambers, jump on and off the bedsteads, and lie on the mattresses and piled up with bolsters and pillows before the enormous fires roaring in the chimneys. From school duty she was exonerated. Mrs. Fairfax had pressed me into her service, and I was all day in the storeroom, helping her and the cook, learning to make custards and cheesecakes and French pastry, to truss game and garnish dessert dishes. The party were expected to arrive on Thursday afternoon, in time for dinner at 6. During the intervening period that I had no time to nurse chimeras, and I believe that I was active and gay as anybody, Adele excepted. Still, now and then I received myself a dampening check to my cheerfulness, and was, in spite of myself, thrown back on the region of doubts and portents and dark conjectures. This was when I chanced to see the third-story staircase door. It had opened slowly to give passage to the form of Grace Poole. She was in a prim cap, white apron, and handkerchief. When I watched her glide along the gallery, her quiet tread muffled in a list slipper, when I saw her look into the bustling, topsy-turvy bedrooms, just say a word, perhaps, to the charwoman about the proper way to polish a grate or clean the marble mantelpiece or take stains from the papered walls and then pass on. She would thus descend into the kitchen once a day, eat her dinner, smoke a moderate pipe on the hearth, and go back, carrying her pot of porter with her for her private solace in her own gloomy upper haunt. Only 1 hour in the 24-hour did she pass with her fellow servants below. All the rest of her time was spent in some low-ceilinged oaken chamber of the second story. There she sat and sewed, and probably laughed drearily to herself, as companionless as a prisoner in her dungeon. The strangest thing of all was that not a soul in the house except me noticed her habits or seemed to marvel at them. No one discussed her position or her employment. No one pitied her solitude or isolation. I once indeed overheard part of a dialogue between Leah and one of the other charwomen, of which Grace formed the subject. Leah had been saying something that I had not caught, and the chairwoman remarked, "She gets good wages, I guess." "Yeah," said Leah. "I wish I was as good, too. But that mine are to be complained of, well, there's no stinginess at Thornfield. But not 1/5 of the sum Mrs. Poole receives, and she's laying by. She goes every quarter to the bank at Millcote, you know. I should not wonder, but she has saved enough to keep her independent if she liked to leave. But I suppose she's got used to the place. And then she's not even 40 yet, and strong and able for anything, and it is too soon for her to give up business." "Ah, she is good hand, I dare say," said the charwoman. "Ah, she understands that she has to do nobody better," rejoined Leah significantly, "and it is not every one that could fill her shoes, and not for all the money she gets." "That is not," was the reply. "I wonder whether the master—" The chairwoman was going to go on, but here Leah turned and perceived me, and she instantly gave her companion a nudge. "Ah, she doesn't know," I heard the woman whisper. Leah shook her head, and the conversation was one of course that dropped. All I had gathered from it amounted to this, that there was a mystery at Thornfield, and that from participation in that mystery I was purposely excluded. Thursday came. All work had been completed the previous evening. Carpets were laid down, bed hangings festooned, radiant white counterpanes spread, toilet tables arranged, furniture rubbed, flowers piled in the vases. Both chambers and saloons looked as fresh and bright as hands could make them. The hall, too, was scoured, and the great carved clock, as well as the steps and the banisters of the staircase, were polished to the brightness of glass. In the dining room, the sideboard flashed resplendent with plate. In the drawing room and boudoir, vases of exotics bloomed on all sides. Afternoon arrived, and Mrs. Fairfax assumed her best black satin gown, her gloves, and her gold watch, for it was part of her to receive the company, to conduct the ladies to their rooms, and Adele, too, would be dressed, though I thought that she had little chance of being introduced to the party that day at least. However, to please her, I allowed Sophie to apparel her in one of her short, full muslin frocks. For myself, I had no need to make any change. I should not be called upon to quit my sanctum of the schoolroom, for a sanctum it was now become to me, a very pleasant refuge in time of trouble. It had been a mild, serene spring day, one of those days which towards the end of March or the beginning of April rise as shining over the earth as heralds of summer. It was drawing to an end now, but the evening was even warm, and I sat at work in the schoolroom with the open window. "It gets late," said Mrs. Fairfax, entering in a rustling state. I am glad to be ordered dinner for an hour after the time Mr. Rochester mentioned, for it is past 6 now, and I have set John down to the gates to see if there is anything on the road. One can see a long way from thence in the direction of Millcote. She went to the window. Here he is, she said. Well, John? Leaning out, she then said, Any news? They're coming, ma'am, was the answer. They'll be here in 10 minutes. Adele flew to the window, and I followed, taking care to stand on one side so that, screened by a curtain, that I could see without being seen. The 10 minutes John had given seemed very long, but at last wheels were heard. 4 equestrians galloped up the drive, and after them came 2 open carriages. Fluttering veils and waving plumes filled the vehicles. 2 of the cavaliers were young, dashing-looking gentlemen. The third was Mr. Rochester on his black horse, Mesrar. Pilot was then also bounding before him. At his side rode a lady, and he and she were the first of the party. Her purple riding habit almost swept the ground. Her veil streamed long on the breeze, mingling with its transparent folds, and gleaming through them shone rich raven ringlets. Miss Ingram, exclaimed Mrs. Fairfax, and the way she hurried to her post below. The cavalcade, following the sweep of the drive, quickly turned the angle of the house, and I lost sight of it. Adele now petitioned to go down, but I took her on my knee and gave her to understand that she must not go on any account, and think of venturing in sight of the ladies, either now or at any other time, unless expressly sent for. That Mr. Rochester would be very angry. She then shed some very natural tears on being told this, but as I began to look very grave, she consented at last to wipe them. A joyous stir was now audible in the hall. Gentlemen's deep tones and ladies' silvery accents bent harmoniously together, and distinguishable above all, though not loud, was the sonorous voice of the master of Thornfield Hall, welcoming his fair and gallant guests under its roof. Then the light steps ascended the stairs, and there was a tripping through the gallery, soft cheerful laughs, and opening and closing doors, and for a time a hush. Il changeait des toilettes, said Adele, who, listening attentively, had followed every movement, and she sighed, Chez maman. And then she said, Croyez-vous avant du mon délai suivant partir au salon et les chambre? En souveiller recueillir les femmes des chambres coiffer et habiller les dames. Et c'est si amusant. Comme cela on apprend? Don't you feel hungry, Adele? Mais oui, mademoiselle. Voilà 5 ou 6 horas que nous n'avons pas mon âge. Well now, while the ladies are in their room, I will venture down and get you something to eat. And issuing from my asylum with precaution, I sought a back stairs, which conducted directly to the kitchen. All in that region was fire and commotion. The soup and fish were in the last stage of projection, and the cook hung over her crucibles in a frame of mind and body threatening spontaneous combustion. In the servants' hall was 2 coachmen and 3 gentlemen's gentlemen, and they stood or sat around the fire. The Abigails that I suppose were upstairs, with their mistresses and their new servants that had been hired from Millcote, were bustling about everywhere. Threading this chaos, I at last reached the larder, where I took possession of a cold chicken, a roll of bread, and some tarts, as well as a plate or 2 and a knife and fork. With this booty I made a hasty retreat, and I regained the gallery, and was just shutting the back door behind me, when an accelerated hum warned me that the ladies were about to issue from their chambers. I could not proceed to the schoolroom without passing some of their doors, and running the risk of being surprised by my cargo of victuallage. So I stood at this end, which, being windowless, was dark, quite dark now, for the sun was set and the twilight was gathering. Presently the chambers gave up their fair tenants one after another. Each came out gaily and airily, with dresses that gleamed lustrous through the dusk. For a moment they stood grouped together at the other extremity of the gallery, conversing in a key of sweet, subdued vivacity. They then descended the staircase almost as noiselessly as a bright mist rolls down a hill. Their collective appearance had left on me an impression of high-born elegance, such as I had never before received. I found Adele peeping through the schoolroom door, which she held ajar. "What beautiful ladies!" she cried in English. "Oh, how I wish to go to them. Do you think Mr. Rochester will send for us by and by after dinner?" "No, I do not. Mr. Rochester has something else to think about. Never mind the ladies tonight. Perhaps you will see them tomorrow. Here's your dinner." She was really hungry, so the chicken and tarts served to divert her attention for a time. It was well that I secured this forage, for both she and I, and Sophie, to whom I conveyed a share of our repast, would have run a chance of getting no dinner at all. Everyone downstairs was much too engaged to think about us. The dessert was not carried out until after 9, and at 10 footmen were still running to and fro with trays and coffee cups. I allowed Adele to sit up much later than usual, for she declared that she could not possibly go to sleep while the doors kept opening and shutting below, and people were bustling about. Besides, she added, a message might possibly come from Mr. Rochester when she was undressed. "Et alors, que dommage!" I told her stories as long as she would listen to them, and then, for a change, I took her out into the gallery. The hall lamp was now lit, and it amused her to look over the balustrade and watch the servants passing backwards and forwards. When the evening was far advanced, the sound of music issued from the drawing-room. Whither the piano had been removed, Adele and I had sat down at the top step of the stairs to listen. Presently a voice blent with the rich tones of the instrument. It was a lady who sang, and very sweet her notes were. The solo over, a duet followed, and then a joyous conversational murmur filled up the intervals. I listened long, and suddenly I discovered that my ear was wholly intent on analyzing the mingled sounds and trying to discriminate against the confusion of accents, those of Mr. Rochester. And when it caught them, which it soon did, it found a further task in framing the tones and rendered the distance inarticulate. The clock then struck 11, and I looked at Adele, whose head leant against my shoulder. Her eyes were waxing heavy, so I took her up in my arms and carried her off to bed. It was near 1 before the gentlemen and ladies sought their own chambers. The next day was as fine as its predecessor. It was devoted by the party to an excursion to some site in the neighborhood. They set out early in the forenoon, some on horseback, the rest in carriages. I witnessed both the departure and the return. Miss Ingram, as before, was the only lady equestrian, and as before Mr. Rochester galloped at her side. The two rode a little apart from the rest. I pointed out this circumstance to Mrs. Fairfax, who was standing at the window with me. "You said it was not likely that they would think of being married," I said. "But you see Mr. Rochester evidently prefers her to any of the other ladies." "Yes, I dare say. No doubt he admires her." "And she him," I added. "Look how she leans her head towards him, as if she were conversing confidentially. I wish I could see her face. I have never had a glimpse of it yet." "You will see her this evening," answered Mrs. Fairfax. "I happened to remark to Mr. Rochester how much Adele wished to be introduced to the ladies, and he said, 'Oh, let her come into the drawing-room after dinner, and request Miss Eyre to accompany her.'" "Yes, he said that from mere politeness. I need not go, I am not sure," I answered. Well, I observed to him that you were unused to company, and I did not think that you would like appearing before a gay party, all strangers, and of course he replied in his quick way, nonsense, and that if, you were to object, that I would tell you that it was his particular wish, and that if you resisted, that he would come and fetch you in case of contumacy. I will not give him that trouble, I answered. I will go if no better may be. But I don't like it. Shall you be there, Mrs. Fairfax? No, I pleaded off, and he admitted my plea. I'll tell you how to manage so as to avoid the embarrassment of making a formal entrance, and which is the most disagreeable part of the business. You must go into the drawing-room while it is empty before the ladies leave the dinner table, and choose your seat in any quiet nook that you like. You need not stay longer after the gentlemen come in, unless you please. Just let Mr. Rochester see you are there, and then slip away. Nobody will notice you. Will these people remain long, do you think? Oh, perhaps maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Certainly not more, after the Easter recess. Sir George Lynn, who was lately elected member for Millcote, will have to go up on town to take his seat. I dare say that Mr. Rochester will accompany him. It surprises me that he has already made so protracted a stay at Thornfield. It was with some trepidation that I perceived the hour approach when I was to repair with my charge to the drawing-room. Adele had been in a state of ecstasy all day after hearing that she was to be presented to the ladies in the evening, and it was not till Sophie commenced the operation of dressing her that she sobered down. When the importance of the process quickly steadied her, and by the time that she had her curls arranged in well-smoothed drooping clusters, her pink satin frock put on, and her hair long sash-tied, and her lace mittens adjusted, she looked as grave as any judge. No need to warn her not to disarrange her own attire. When she was dressed, she sat demurely down in a little chair, and taking care previously to lift up the satin skirt for fear that she would crease it, and assured me that she would not stir thence till I was ready. This I quickly was, in my best dress, one that was a silver gray one, that had been purchased for a wedding and never worn since. And then my hair was soon smoothed, and my sole ornament was the pearl brooch, and then we descended. Fortunately, there was another entrance to the drawing-room than that through the saloon where they all seated at dinner. We found the apartment vacant, a large fire burning silently on the marble hearth, and wax candles shining in the bright solitude, amid the exquisite flowers with which the tables were adorned. The crimson curtain hung before the arch. Slight as it was, the separation, this drapery, formed the party in the adjoining saloon. They spoke in a low key that nothing of their conversation could be distinguished beyond a soothing murmur. Adele, who appeared to be still under the influence of a most solemnizing impression, sat down without a word on the footstool that I pointed out to her. I retired to a window seat, and taking a book from the table, endeavored to read. Adele brought her stool to my feet. Ere long she touched my knee. What is it, Adele? Est-ce que je n'ai pas pour prétendre un salut de ces fleurs magnifiques, mademoiselle? Salut pour compléter mon toilette. You think too much of your toilette, Adele, but you may have a flower. And I took a rose from a vase and fastened it to her sash. She sighed a sigh of ineffable satisfaction, as if her cup of happiness were now full. I turned my face away to conceal a smile, and I could not suppress. There was something ludicrous as well as painful in the little Parisienne's earnest and innate devotion to matters of dress. A soft sound of rising now became audible. The curtain was swept back from the arch, and through it appeared the dining-room, with its lit luster pouring down light on the silver and glass of the magnificent dessert service covering a long table. A band of ladies stood in the opening. They entered, and the curtain fell behind them. They were but 8, yet somehow, as they flocked in, they gave the impression of a much larger number. Some of them were very tall. Many were dressed in white, and all had a sweeping amplitude of array that seemed to magnify their persons as a mist magnifies the moon. I rose and curtsied to them. 1 or 2 bent their heads in return. The others only stared at me. They dispersed about the room, reminding me, by the lightness and the buoyancy of their movements, of a flock of white plumy birds. Some of them threw themselves in half-reclining positions on the sofas and ottomans. Some bent over the tables and examined the flowers and the books. The rest gathered in a group around the fire. All talked in a low but clear tone which seemed habitual to them. I knew their names afterwards, and may as well mention them now. First, there was Mrs. Eshton and 2 of her daughters. She had evidently been a handsome woman, and was well preserved still. Of her daughters, the eldest, Amy, was rather little, naive and childlike in face and manner, and piquant in form. Her white muslin dress and blue sash became her well. The second was Louisa, a taller and more elegant in figure, with a very pretty face of that order the French termed ménage chiffon. Both sisters were fair as lilies. Lady Lynn was a large and stout personage of about 40, very erect and very haughty-looking, richly dressed in a satin robe of changeful sheen. Her dark hair shone glossily under the shade of an osier plume, and within the circlet of a band of gems. Mrs. Colonel Dent was less showy, but I thought more ladylike. She had a slight figure, a pale, gentle face, and fair hair. Her black satin dress, her scarf of rich foreign lace, and her pearl ornaments pleased me better than the rainbow radiance of the tilted dame. But the 3 most distinguished, partly perhaps because the tallest figures of the band, were the Dowager Lady Ingram and her daughters Blanche and Mary. They were all 3 of the loftiest stature of women. The dowager might have been between 40 and 50. Her shape was still fine, her hair still black. Her teeth, too, were still apparently perfect. Most people would have termed her a splendid woman of her age, and so she was, no doubt, physically speaking, but then there was an expression of almost insupportable haughtiness in her bearing and countenance. She had Roman features and a double chin, disappearing into a throat like a pillar. These features appeared to me not only inflated and darkened, but even furrowed with pride, and the chin was sustained by the same principle, and in a position of almost preternatural erectness. She had likewise a fierce and a hard eye. It reminded me of Mrs. Reed's. She mouthed her words in speaking. Her voice was deep, and its reflections very pompous, very dogmatical, very intolerant, in short. A crimson velvet robe and a shawl turban of some gold-wrought Indian fabric invested her, and with a true imperial dignity. Blanche and Mary were of equal stature, straight and tall as poplars. Mary was too slim for her height, but Blanche was molded like a Dian. I regarded her, and of course, with special interest. First, I wished to see whether her appearance accorded with Mrs. Fairfax's description. Secondly, whether at all it resembled the fancy miniature that I had painted of her. And thirdly, it will out, whether it were such as I should fancy likely to suit Mr. Rochester's taste. As far as a person went, she answered point for point, both to my picture and Mrs. Fairfax's description. The noble bust, the sloping shoulders, the graceful neck, the dark eyes and black ringlets were all there. But her face was like her mother's, a youthful, unfurrowed likeness, The same low brow, the same high features, the same pride. It was not, however, so saturnine. She laughed continually, and her laugh was satirical, and so was the habitual expression of her arched and haughty lip. Genius is said to be self-conscious. I cannot tell whether Miss Ingram was a genius, but she was self-conscious, remarkably self-conscious indeed. She entered into a discourse on botany with gentle Mrs. Dent, and it seemed Mrs. Dent had not studied that science, though she said that she had liked flowers, and especially the wild ones, and Miss Ingram had, and she had ran over its vocabulary with an air. I presently perceived that she was trailing Mrs. Dent, that is, playing on her ignorance. Her trail might be clever, but it was decidedly not good-natured. She played, and her execution was brilliant. She sang, and her voice was fine. She talked French apart to her mamma, and she talked it well, with fluency and with such a good accent. Mary had a milder and more open countenance than Blanche, softer features too, and a skin some shades fairer. But Mary was deficient in life. Her face lacked expression, her eye luster. She had nothing to say, and having once taken her seat, remained fixed like a statue in its niche. The sisters were both attired in spotless white. And did I now think that Miss Ingram such a choice as Mr. Rochester would likely make? I could not tell. I did not know his taste in any female beauty. If he liked the majestic, she was the very type of majesty. Then she was accomplished and sprightly. Most gentlemen would admire her, I thought, and that he, too, did admire her. I already seemed to have obtained proof. To remove the last shade of doubt, it remained but to see them together. You are not suppose, reader, that Adele has all this time been sitting motionless on the stool at my feet. No, when the ladies entered, she rose and advanced to meet them, and made a stately reverence, and said with gravity, "Bonjour, mesdemoiselles." And Miss Ingram had looked down on her with a mocking air, and exclaimed, "Oh, what a little puppet!" Lady Lynn then had remarked, "It is Mr. Rochester's ward. I suppose the little French girl was what he was speaking of." Mrs. Dent had kindly taken her hand and given her a kiss. Amy and Louisa Ashton had cried out simultaneously, "What a love of a child!" And then they had called her to the sofa, where she sat now, ensconced between them, and chattering alternatively in French and broken English, absorbing not only the young lady's attention, but that of Mrs. Ashton and Lady Lynn, and getting spoilt to her heart's content. At last the coffee had been brought in, and the gentlemen were summoned. I sit in the shade, if any shade there be in this brilliantly lit apartment. The window curtain half hides me. Again the arch yawns, and they come. The collective appearance of the gentlemen, like that of the ladies, is very imposing. They are all costumed in black, most of them tall, some of them young. Henry and Frederick Lynn are very dashing sparks indeed, and Colonel Dent is a fine, soldierly man. Mr. Ashton, the magistrate of the court, is a gentleman-like. His hair is quite white, and his eyebrows and whiskers still dark, which gives him something of an appearance of a Père Noble des Theatres. Lord Ingram, like his sisters, is very tall, just like them. Also, he is handsome, but he shares Mary's apathetic and listless look. He seems to have more length of limb than vivacity of blood or vigor of brain. And where is Mr. Rochester? He comes in last. I am not looking at the arch, yet I see him enter. I try to concentrate my attention on those netting needles, on the meshes of the purse that I am forming. I wish to think only of the work that I have in my hands, to see only the silver beads and the silk threads that lie in my lap, whereas I distinctly behold his figure, and I inevitably recall the moment when I last saw it, just after that I had rendered him what he deemed an essential service, and he, holding my hand, looking down on my face, surveyed me with eyes that revealed a heart full and eager to overflow, in whose emotions that I had a part. How near had I approached him at that moment? What had occurred since, calculated to change his and my relative positions? Yet how distant, how far estranged we were. So far estranged that I did not expect him to come and speak to me. I did wonder when, and without looking at me, he took a seat at the other side of the room and began conversing with some of the ladies. No sooner did I see that his attention was riveted on them, and that I might gaze without being observed, than my eyes were drawn involuntarily to his face. I could not keep their lids under control. They would rise, and the irids would fix on him, and I looked, and I had an acute pleasure in looking, a precious yet poignant pleasure, pure gold with steely point of agony, a pleasure like what the thirst-perishing man might feel, who knows the well to which he has crept is poison, yet stoops and drinks divine draughts nevertheless. Most true is that beauty is in the eye of the gazer. My master's colorless olive face was square, with a massive brow and broad jetty brows, deep eyes, strong features, firm and grim mouth. All energy, decision, and will were not beautiful according to rule, but they were more beautiful to me. They were full of an interest, an influence that quite mastered me, that took my feelings from my own power and fettered them into his. I had not intended to love him. The reader knows that I had wrought hard to extricate my soul the germs of love there had been detected, and now, at the first renewed view of him, they spontaneously arrived, green and strong. He made me love him without looking at him, and he without looking at me. I compared him with his guests. What was the gallant grace of the Lynns, the languid elegance of Lord Ingram, even the military distinction of Colonel Dent, contrasted with his look of native pith and genuine power? I had no sympathy in their appearance, in their expression, yet I could imagine that most observers would call them attractive, handsome, imposing, and while they would pronounce Mr. Rochester at once harsh-featured and melancholy-looking, I saw them smile, laugh. It was nothing. The light of candles had as much soul in it as their smiles, the tinkle of the bell as much significance as their laugh. I saw Mr. Rochester smile. His stern features softened. His eye grew both brilliant and gentle, its ray both searching and sweet. He was talking at the moment to Louisa and Amy Eshton. I wondered to see them receive with calm that look which seemed to me so penetrating. I expected their eyes to fall, their color to rise under it, yet I was glad when I found that there were no sense moved. And then I thought to myself that he is not to them what he is to me, that he is not of their kind, and I believe that he is of mine. I'm almost sure that he is, and I feel akin to him. I understand the language of his countenance and movements, though rank and wealth sever us widely. I have something in my brain and heart and in my blood and nerves that assimilates me mentally to him. Did I say a few days since that I had nothing to do with him but to receive my salary at his hands? Did I forbid myself to think of him in any other light than as a paymaster? Blasphemy against nature. Every good, true, vigorous feeling that I have gathers impulsively around him. I know I must conceal my sentiments. I must smother hope. I must remember that he cannot care much for me. For when I say that I am of his kind, I do not mean that I have his force to influence and his spell to attract. I mean only that I have certain tastes and feelings in common with him. I must then repeat continually that we are forever sundered, and yet, while I breathe and think, I must love him. Coffee is then handed. The ladies, since the gentlemen entered, have become lively as larks. Conversation waxes brisk and merry. Colonel Dent and Mr. Eshton argue on politics. Their wives listen. The two proud dowagers, Lady Lynn and Lady Ingram, confabulate together. Sir George, whom, by the by, I have forgotten to describe, was a very big and very fresh-looking country gentleman, and he stands before their sofa, coffee-cup in hand, and occasionally puts in a word. Mr. Frederick Lynn has taken a seat beside Mary Ingram, and is showing her the engravings of a splendid volume. She looks and smiles now and then, but apparently says little. The tall and phlegmatic Lord Ingram leans with folded arms on the chair-back of the little and lively Amy Eshton. She glances up at him and chatters like a wren. She likes him better than she does Mr. Rochester. Henry Lynn has taken possession of an ottoman at the feet of Louisa, and Adele shares it with him. He's trying to talk French with her, and Louisa laughs at his blunders. With whom will Blanche Ingram pair? She is standing alone at the table, bending gracefully over an album. She seems waiting to be sought, but she will not wait too long. She herself selects a mate. Mr. Rochester, having quitted the Eshtons, stands on the hearth as solitary as she stands by the table. She confronts him, taking her station on the opposite side of the mantelpiece. "Mr. Rochester, I thought that you were not fond of children." "Nor am I." "Then what induced you to take charge of such a little doll as that?" she said, pointing to Adele. "Where did you pick her up?" "I did not pick her up. She was left in my hands." "You should have sent her to school." "I could not afford it. Schools are so dear." "Why, I suppose that you have a governess for her. I saw a person with her just now. Is she gone?" "Oh, no. There she is still, behind the window curtain. You pay her, of course. I should think it quite as expensive, if not more so, for you have them both to keep in addition." I feared, or should I say hoped, that the allusion to me would make Mr. Rochester glance my way, and I involuntarily shrank farther into the shade, but he never turned his eyes. "I have not considered the subject," he said indifferently, looking straight before him. "No, you men never do consider economy and common sense. You should hear Mamma on the chapter of governesses. Mary and I have had, I should think a dozen at least in our day, half of them detestable and the most ridiculous, and all of them incubi. Were they not, Mamma?" The young lady thus claimed as the dowager's special property reiterated her question with explanation. "My dearest, don't mention governesses. The word makes me nervous. I have suffered a martyrdom from their incompetency and caprice. I thank heaven that I am now done with them." Mrs. Dent here bent over the pious lady and whispered something into her ear. I suppose from the answer elicited, it was a reminder that one of the anathematized race was present. "Ta piss," said her ladyship. "I hope it may do her good." Then, in a lower tone, but still loud enough for me to hear, "I noticed her. I'm a judge of physiognometry, and in hers I see all the faults of her class." "Really now, what are they, madam?" inquired Mr. Rochester aloud. "I will tell you in private, dear," she replied, wagging her turban 3 times with portentous significancy. "But my curiosity will be past its appetite. It craves food now." "Ask Blanche. She is nearer you than I." Oh, don't refer him to me, mamma. I have just one word to say of the whole tribe. They are a nuisance. Not that I ever suffered much from them. I took care to turn the tables. What tricks Theodore and I used to play on our Miss Wilsons, and Mrs. Grays, and Madame Joubert's. Mary was always too sleepy to join in the plot of spirit. The best fun was with Madame Joubert. Miss Wilson was a poor sickly thing, lachrymose and low-spirited, not worth the trouble of vanquishing, in short. And Mrs. Gray was coarse and insensible. No blow would take effect on her. But poor Madame Joubert, I see her yet in her raging passions, when she had been driven to her extremities, split our tea and crumbed our bread and butter. Oh, she tossed our books up into the ceiling and played a charivari with the ruler and the desk and the fender and the fire-irons. Theodore, do you remember those merry days? Yes, I sure do, drawled Lord Ingram. And the poor old stuck used to cry out, "Oh, you villainous child!" And then we sermonized her on the presumption of attempting to teach such clever blades as we were, when she was herself so ignorant. Oh, we did. And Tito, you know I helped you in prosecuting your tutor. Oh, the whey-faced Mr. Vinning, the parson in the pip, as we used to call him. And he and Mrs. Wilson took the liberty of falling in love with each other. At least Tito and I thought so. We surprised sundry tender glances and sighs which we interpreted as tokens of la belle passion. And I promise you, the public soon had benefit of our discovery, and we employed it as a sort of lever to hoist our dead weights from the house. Dear mamma, there, as soon as she had gotten an inkling of the business, found out that it was more of an immoral decency. Oh, did you not, my lady mother? Certainly, my best, and I was quite right. Depend on that. There is 1,000 reasons why liaisons between governesses and tutors should never be tolerated in a moment in any well-regulated house. Firstly, oh, gracious mamma, please spare us the enumeration. Oh, restez. We all know them. Danger of bad example to innocence of childhood. Distractions and consequent negligence of duty on the part of the attached, mutual alliance and reliance, confidence thence resulting insolence, accompanying mutiny and general blow-up. Am I right, Baroness Ingram of Ingram Park? My lily flower, as you right know, as always. Then there's no more to be said. Change the subject. Amy Ashton, not hearing nor heeding this dictum, joined in with her soft infantine tone. Louisa and I used to quiz our governess, too, but she was such a good creature. She would bear anything, and nothing put her out. She was never cross with us. Oh, was she, Louisa? No, never. We might do what we pleased, and ransack her desk and her workbox and turn her drawers inside out, and she was so good-natured, and she would give us anything we asked for. I suppose now, said Miss Ingram, curling her lips sarcastically, we shall have an abstract of memoirs of all the governess's extent. In order to avert such a visitation, I again move the introduction of a new topic. Mr. Rochester, do you second my motion? Madam, I support you on this point, as on every other. Then on me the onus of bringing it forth. Signor Eduardo, will you be the voice tonight? Donna Bianca, if you command it, I will be. Then, signor, I lay on you my sovereign behest to furbish up your lungs and other vocal organs, as they will be wanted by my royal service. Who would not want to be the Rizzo of so divine a Mary? A fig for Rizzo, she cried, tossing her head with all its curls as she moved to the piano. "It is my opinion with the fiddler, David. Must have been an insipid sort of fellow. Oh, I like the black of Bothwell better. To my mind, a man is nothing more without a spice of the devil in him, and the history may say what it will of James Hepburn, but I have a notion that he was of the sort of wild, fierce, and bandit hero whom I could have consented to gift with my hand. Gentlemen, you hear now. Oh, which of you most resembles Bothwell?" cried Mr. Rochester. "I should say that the preference lies with you," responded Colonel Dent. "Oh, my honor, I am much obliged to you," was the reply. Miss Ingram, who now seated herself with proud grace at the piano, and spreading her snowy robes in a queenly amplitude, commenced a brilliant prelude. Talking meantime, she appeared to be on her high horse tonight. Both her words and her air seemed intended to excite not only the admiration but the amazement of her auditors. She was evidently bent on striking them as something very dashing and indeed. "Oh, I am so sick of young men of the present day," she exclaimed, rattling away at the instrument. "Poor puny things, not fit to stir a step beyond Papa's park gates, nor to go even so far without Mamma's permission and guardianship. Oh, creatures so absorbed in care without their pretty faces, and their white hands, and their small feet. If a man had anything to do with beauty, as if loveliness were not the special prerogative of women, her legitimate appendage and heritage. I grant an ugly woman as a blot on the fair face of creation. But as to the gentlemen, let them be solicitous to possess only strength and valor. Let their motto be, hunt, shoot, and fight. The rest is not worth a fillip. Oh, such should be my device were I a man. Whenever I marry," she continued after a pause, which none interrupted, "I am resolved my husband shall soon and shall not be a rival, but a foil to me. I will suffer no competitor near the throne. I shall exact an undivided homage. His devotions shall not be shared between me and the shape that he sees in the mirror. Mr. Rochester, now sing, and I will play for you." "I am all obedience," was the response. "Here, then, is a corsair song. Know that I dote on corsairs, and for the reason sing it con spirito." "Commands from Miss Ingram's lips would put spirit into the mug of milk and water." "Take care, then, that you don't please me. I will shame you by showing you how such things should be done." "That is offering a premium on capacity. I shall now endeavor to fail." "Oh, gardes envie bien. If you err wilfully, I shall devise a proportionate punishment." "Oh, Miss Ingram ought to be clement, for she has it in her power to inflict a chastisement beyond mortal endurance." "Ha! Explain," commanded the lady. "Pardon me, madam, no need for explanation. Your own fine sense must inform you that one of your frowns would be a sufficient substitute for capital punishment." "Sing," she said, and again touching the piano, she commenced an accompaniment in style. Then I thought to myself that it was my time to slip away, but the tones that severed the air arrested me. Mrs. Fairfax had said that Mr. Rochester possessed a fine voice, and he did, a mellow, powerful bass into which he threw his own feeling, his own force, and finding a way through the ear to the heart, and there was a waking sensation strangely. I waited till the last deep and full vibration had expired, till the tide of talk checked an instant and had resumed its flow. I then quitted my sheltered corner and made my exit by the side door, which was fortunately near. Thence a narrow passage led into the hall, and in crossing it I perceived my sandal was loose. I stopped to tie it, and kneeling down for that purpose on the mat at the foot of the staircase, I then heard the dining-room door unclose, and a gentleman came out. Rising hastily, I stood face to face with him. It was Mr. Rochester. "How do you do?" he asked. "I'm very well, sir." "Why did you not come and speak to me in the room?" And this I thought that I might have retorted the question unto him who had put it, but I would not take that freedom, and I answered, "I did not wish to disturb you, as you seemed engaged, sir." "What have you been doing during my absence?" "Nothing in particular, teaching Adele as usual." "And getting a good deal paler than you are now, as I saw at first sight. What is ever the matter?" "Nothing at all, sir." "Did you take any cold that night you half drowned me?" "Not the least." "Return to the drawing-room. You are deserting too early." "I am tired, sir." He looked at me for a minute. "And a little depressed," he said. "About what? Tell me." Nothing, sir. I am not depressed." "But I affirm that you are. So much depressed that a few more words would bring tears to your eyes. Indeed, they are now shining and swimming, and a bead has slipped from the lash and fallen to the flag. If I had time, and was not in mortal dread of some prating prig of a servant passing, I would know what all this means. Well, tonight I do excuse you, but understand that as so long as my visitors stay, I expect you to appear in the drawing-room every night. It is my wish, and do not neglect it. Now go, and send Sophie for Adele. Good night, my—" He stopped, biting his lip, and then abruptly left me. Ooh, it's getting hot. It's getting intense, guys. But that will be another chapter for another day. So, if you enjoyed tuning in and watching me and listening to me read more of Jane Eyre, please feel free to like, subscribe, or follow. I do stream on multiple platforms, and I do stream regularly. You can find me on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Twitch for when I go live. And when you do choose to like, subscribe, or follow on one of those platforms, you'll get notifications when I go live, so you won't miss a reading. And with that being said, I hope to see you guys tomorrow. I do another stream at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And yeah, I look forward to hopefully seeing you guys. And with that being said, I hope you all stay safe and stay geeky as always.